I've tried with my family is I can breathe. Okay, yes, it's only a teaspoon breath, but I'm breathing. Or I'm okay. Look, as long as I don't move or eat or talk, function, I'll be fine. I've come up with the rules are if you can't breathe, you go to A&E. And look, uh, I'm breathing. Um, I've tried ambulances or for emergencies or accidents. I haven't had an accident and I'm still breathing, so there's no emergency. I've had ambulance staff tell me off repeatedly for not calling them earlier. I've been told that my jugular veins swell up so massively that it's so obvious I should have come, but I just can't do it. But it's the stress of accessing A&E that makes me do everything I can to not go there. Why am I like it? Because of my autism and the sensory needs involved, I'd rather stay at home and not breathe properly and be dizzy or unable to function. Risk everything, really, because it takes so much. First, let me give you an idea of what it's like. First, I'm told that when I arrive at A&E that even though I'm struggling with an asthma attack and I'm showing my autism card and I can hardly breathe, that I have to put on a mask over the top. And I'm pleading with my eyes desperately, showing my autism card. But there's no comprehension of what that means and to them. And I'm panicking and I can barely breathe. And now they want to take more oxygen away from me. I can't think, I can't speak. They refuse my carer access and I just feel lost. I'm now sitting in an A&E bed in a very small, very white A&E room. It's lined with white cupboards, flashing machines, flickering monitors, leads and wires. I'm struggling to process anything I see, and it's all so much. I'm alone, my head is lacking oxygen, so it's confused, and I can't think straight. Every part of my body is impacted. I'm exhausted from the coughing and fighting to breathe. I'm struggling to stay calm, but there isn't a space left in my brain for rational thought. I'm too overstimulated now with the smells, the lights, the unpredictable noises, and I lose the ability to find words for conversation. I just stare. I'm mute. Everything's too much and I want to give up. In my head, I'm screaming, but nothing's coming out. Look at me. You wouldn't know. But if I could, even in that state, I want to bolt. Even when I have no oxygen, I want to bolt with all my might out of there. The nebulizer medication that they've put me on is beginning to work and some oxygen is putting some calm to my brain. For the first time, I can access see in the room. It's way too bright to think or even feel comfortable. So I close my eyes. Oh, wow. Just using my ears is too much. Have you ever closed your eyes and listened to the environment? There's shouting, crying, screaming, calling, alarms of different frequencies and decibels, machines beeping, different people's accents, tones, speeds, pitch, people running past, pushing in and out, trolleys squeaking, and I can't control any of it. I hear it all at the same pitch, the same levels. I cover my ears and crush my eyes tighter. My breathing deteriorates again as I feel the panic rise. Calm down, I tell myself. It won't help anything, but it's so hard. A few minutes later, I've been able to adapt a little by having my eyes shut only, letting sound in. The nebulizer has had some time so I can settle my breathing and I can move on a little mentally. Communication starts to come to me. I realise there's new faces, new accents, new clothes, and you're all staring directly head on at me, asking me unpredictable questions. You're expecting me to answer both quickly and efficiently to the fullest extent immediately. You are pushed for time But I'm confused. I'm lacking oxygen. So much I want to say, but I can't do it. I plead with my eyes. Different faces want different things from me. Someone's taking my arm for blood. Someone else is attaching a heart monitor, another a nebulizer. I just let them in. I can't think, I can't see or really function. I'm petrified. Then they suddenly leave me there, like that, alone, given more time. I move to my next sense. I open my eyes. Again, slowly, everything is brilliantly white and shiny, too bright. I cringe, pain in my head and eyes. I look above. I can count 4 big, square, bright lights on the ceiling. There's an examination light on an arm extension hanging directly over the bed in my eyes, all shining straight on me. There's a light above my bed head that is too as well lit up. Just in this one room, the one I'm in alone. 6 lights? Too much. I can't regulate my breathing or think clearly as there are too many messages rushing into my eyes and ears. All I can think is I want to bolt, to find silence and darkness, but I can't. I regret coming, even though I know I'm where I need to be. I try my best to get control, to calm myself, but you need space in your brain to do this, and my head is too full. My senses are going too wild. I decide the only way to gain any kind of self-control is to turn down the amount of lights, as this impacts no one else. I never want to be a pain to anyone. So in my oxygen lacking, dizzy, overwhelmed brain, I decide the best move to calm my senses is to turn off some of these blinding beacons. So while still struggling to breathe, still wearing an oxygen mask with the nebulizer medication that's attached to the machine across the other side of the room, and alongside that is a tall stand with the drip hanging from it, feeding into my arm. And I have the heart monitor leads and sticker things still going. I literally crawl and half stumble to the end of my bed with my eyes screeched shut. I slide down onto the floor, but by this point I'm spent. My breathing is so bad. I know this is potentially dangerous and all I'm doing is making things worse, but I can't stop the need to cut the lights. I'm not going to go back. But I realized this wasn't clever. I now trigger another asthma attack. I stretch over to reach the light switch by the door, turning off the 4 ceiling lights. This leaves the examination light and the bed light bright over the bed lights still on for staff. But wow, what a difference for me. I physically feel a patch of fog clearing in my brain, even though I'm still struggling to breathe so much. I know in my heart it was the right decision. But now I'm looking around and I'm hugging the bottom of the bed because I'm on the floor and I'm so tired from my mission. My breathing is so bad, I've nothing left in me to get back on the bed. But weirdly, I'm actually happier. I'm more peaceful now. There's less light. So I sit on the floor, hugging my bed, waiting to be able to find the strength and breath to get back up on my bed and start recovering. Finally. To which then the door flies open and a nurse comes charging in saying, "What are all these lights doing off?" and promptly whacks all the lights back on again, turns unceremoniously and plonks me back on the bed and walks out. My eyes fill with tears, my heart races, and I go back into another asthma attack. I'm gutted as I realise I'm back to square one. That's you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Keely. Yeah, incredibly moving, right? And different to hear from a perspective of someone who is going through this. Thanks so much, Keely. Yeah, and I can see lots of people putting in the comments. Thank you for sharing. And we'll hear from Keely again in a bit. Oh, I hope you get a time, Keely, to have a look through some of these messages because it's lovely. Let's go over to Mandy. So Mandy is going to talk to you a bit about sensory processing and the sorts of things to look for and how you can help support. Hey, Mandy, I'd like to welcome you to the stage.
Hello, I'm here. I'm just going to share my presentation, which hopefully will work. Ding. From beginning. Right. Okay. Not quite sure what to do about that. I'm hoping that none of you can see that I've got a little message covering up part of my presentation, telling me who's in the waiting room. Okay. So this is only a brief introduction to sensory processing. We do a whole sort of 3-hour training on this. You're getting basically the very cut down version, just to give you an overview really of what it is that we all really need to know about sensory processing when it comes to autism. The main aims for me today are that you go away with a good understanding of the impact of sensory processing differences on the lives of autistic individuals. And I think Keely's just done a really good job of explaining, you know, just one area in which this can have a massive impact. But also, if you're working with autistic individuals, when to ask for additional professional input, because it's like how much of an impact is this having, and obviously for Keely it's having a huge impact. I'm not an occupational therapist, I'm not a professional in that sense, qualified teacher, and I've got lots of training and knowledge about autism, but there are very few occupational therapists out there who are trained in specifically sensory processing when it comes to autism. And the problem with that is that they do require a different level of support. So let's start with the really obvious stuff. We all know that we have got at least 5 sensory systems. You'll probably all be familiar with the 5 basic ones. So, you know, sight, sound, your smell, your taste, and your hearing, and your touch. So you've got 5 main senses that we all know about. You've also got 3 other senses that are less well known, but come under the whole sensory processing thing. So you've got proprioception, proprioception being your body's awareness of where it is, and how that's communicated to your brain. So, for example, if somebody's doing an awful lot of fidgeting, that might be because their brain isn't getting the messages from their bottom that they're sitting on a chair, so that's doing this sensory seeking thing where it wiggles about. See that a lot in classrooms, and people often mistake that for hyperactivity, whereas actually it's more sensory seeking behaviour, and obviously there can be overlaps with that too. Your vestibular sense is your sense of balance, so it's the thing that enables you to walk, to ride a bicycle, to coordinate throwing and catching, balance, all of those things. And then we have interoception, and there isn't a picture for interoception because it's one of those things that it's really hard to visualize. Your interoception is hugely important, and it's only fairly recently, relatively, that we have come to understand the significance of interoception in regulating all sorts of things. So your interoception tells you how hot you are, how cold you are, whether you're hungry, whether you're thirsty, whether you need to go to the loo or not. And it regulates your pain, and I mean it's huge. And importantly, particularly for autistic people who disproportionately have a condition called alexithymia. I think they think something like 50% of autistic people struggle with alexithymia. It is possible to have that in the general population as well, but not as common. Alexithymia is the inability to recognise your emotions and feelings for what they are and to process them. So you become overwhelmed by an emotion, but you don't necessarily know what that is. And even if you do learn to recognise over the years what it represents, it's still really hard to regulate it and control it and manage it. So because that's linked to interoception, it's such a fascinating area. I can't even begin to explain it in great detail. But let me give you some practical examples of what all of these things can have an impact on. Let's look at eating as an example. So the appearance of food. We know that autistic people pay a great deal of attention to detail sometimes, and might have difficulties in coping with change. So it might be the positioning of the food on the plate that's altered. It might be that the food is overcooked or undercooked compared to normal. It might be that it's, there are bits in it. The packaging might have changed. The brand might be different. The logo might be a different colour. The box might be damaged. There's all sorts of things that can have an impact on someone's initial reaction to food. I have a brother-in-law who isn't diagnosed with anything, but as a little boy, and in fact all right the way up to when I first met him when he was in his late 20s, his mother would cook Sunday lunch, and she was trying to save money, so she would try and buy cheaper rather than branded foods. And the one thing she couldn't get away with was changing the peas. Frozen peas, they had to be bird's eye. She even tried buying Sainsbury's peas and pouring them into a bird's eye bag, and then in front of him pouring them from the bird's eye bag into the saucepan. He still knew. Don't ask me how. I can't tell the difference between those peas. I can tell the difference between other peas, but anyway. So it's all of those things. And then you've got the sounds associated with eating. You've got the sounds of other people eating, which can be pretty off-putting, let's face it. And if you have auditory processing that is much, much more intense than a typical person's, you're going to hear sounds other people can't hear. So you're going to hear the chewing, the munching, the crockery on the plate. My eldest can't cope with that. She's 29 and still wants to eat with plastic crockery and out of plastic bowls because that noise is intolerable to her, and the sensation of it as well. It's the I suppose the equivalent for those of us who can remember blackboards in the classroom of nails down the blackboard. It does that horrible sort of shivery thing. Sorry if I've just done that to all of you. There's so much more to all of this than people with typical sensory development realise, and it is really hard for you to appreciate if you don't experience things to this extent, just how debilitating this can be. But sometimes it's actually necessary to let autistic people eat in different places to the rest of the people there, because you can't eat yourself if you're surrounded by things that are just stopping you. Then you've got people who can only eat dry food, people who can only eat wet food, people who have to have their food completely separated on the plate, one thing at a time, or all mixed together, and that's entirely, individual. Our sense of smell is always going to have a massive impact on what we taste. So if you've got a really, really intensely concentrated sense of smell, you're going to smell stuff far more intensely than everybody else. Some people can't bear hot food, some people can't bear cold food, or they may seek extremes of both. And I've got that in my family. I've got a husband, undiagnosed, who microwaves everything within an inch of its life, cannot bear to be served up food that isn't piping hot. So, if we go to a takeaway or anything like that, he will bring it home and microwave it. He won't just eat it as it is. My eldest daughter, completely the opposite. She will basically wait for her food to get as cold as possible before she eats it. So there you go. It may be that they find eating actually really uncomfortable and painful because they've got that heightened sensory sensitivity, tactile sensitivity in their mouths, or it might be that it hurts their teeth. I mean, honestly, goes on and on. And then you've got the physical side of things, people finding it difficult to sit still, finding it difficult to coordinate the hand-eye movement. Some of them might lack the fine or gross motor skills you need to, for example, to suck or to chew, having that oral motor coordination thing going on. So, that's just eating. Now, translate those same experiences to other everyday scenarios. As Keely mentioned, going into A&E, whoa, overload. Catching a bus, visiting the job centre, going to hospital for, even as an outpatient or as an inpatient for something that you've planned, it's still all really, really overwhelming. Have a think about the things you do on a daily basis that you completely take for granted that you can cope with. And imagine what it would be like if you couldn't. It's huge. And sensory processing underpins everything. We can't function when we're uncomfortable. It will override everything else. If you were all in a room together and there were no chairs and I told you you'd all got to sit on the floor and the floor was covered in pebbles, you'd all by now be fidgeting and wriggling and trying to get yourselves comfortable. Some of you probably would have remained standing. If the whole time you were in this room together, some very loud music was going to play every time I tried to speak, if there was a horrible, pungent smell coming from somewhere, if the lights kept going on and off, or there was one that was flickering incessantly, and I mean that can happen and drive you absolutely bonkers. There were incessant interruptions and so on. Some of you might be struggling with the beep beep as people arrive and leave the session this morning. Totally apologise for that. I still haven't found out how you mute the bing bong. But the implications for autistic people who have sensory processing difficulties alongside their autism, for their learning, for their ability to function, is absolutely huge, because this is what they're going through on a daily basis. And if you've got all of that stuff at the bottom going on and making you feel uncomfortable, everything else basically gets out of sync. I'm going to read you an email. And this was an email from a young lady who I know very well, who is actually currently working as an ambulance crew member, and used to work actually in dispatch, and found dispatch really difficult because of the open plan office and the constant phone calls. And once I've read this, you'll understand why. So tonight on healthcare professionals not understanding autism, counsellors only offer phone therapy sessions. I explain, due to my autism diagnosis, this does not suit me. They insist I need to try for 3 weeks just to make sure it's not suitable before they offer alternatives. I have explained multiple times that phone calls are absolutely not appropriate in a therapy context due to my autism, and yet they just won't listen. Insist on phoning me every week to ask if I still actually want help, and if so, to rearrange my phone sessions. Of course I want help. I wouldn't have requested counselling, be on medication, be researching ways to change my lifestyle to improve my horrendously low self-esteem, depression and anxiety I've battled for over 10 years now, if I didn't want help. I am sick to death of being labelled as difficult or awkward or stupid or lazy because of traits that my autism causes. I push myself so far and achieve so much, despite the difficulties I face in my head and from onlookers who don't understand, and I am especially sick of getting it from people who are supposed to care about my mental well-being. Let me give you an idea. You sit in a crowded shopping centre, in a coffee shop, having a conversation. You hear noise around you, that hum of chatter from tables near you, the odd quiet ting when some change is dropped on the floor, a baby crying faintly as it walks past, but you're still in that conversation. I sit in a crowded place, having a conversation. I hear all those tables near me too, but I hear what they're saying. I hear their dramas, their life stories, their jokes, their arguments. I hear the lights buzzing. I hear a huge crash when someone drops a penny. I hear the mechanical screeching of the escalators, the screaming of a baby, every coffee being poured, and trying to take in what's being said to me directly with all of that information coming in at once is legitimately painful. Despite the myths about autistic people not understanding body language, the majority of time in a conversation, I will rely solely on facial expressions, body language, and what I know about conversational rules and the person in front of me, and just fill in the gaps in my head where I'm interrupted by my surroundings every damn 3 seconds. It is so much to process and so much to take in. So phone calls are 100 times worse because I can't rely on any of that, especially with someone I don't know, so I can't visualise them. Information overload for autism I like to explain as, imagine having a person 3 inches from your face, from every angle, all of them screaming at you at once. That's what my head feels like when I'm overwhelmed. To put it in layman's terms, If I was deaf, they would not be saying, oh, just give it 3 weeks to make sure you can't actually hear me. That is what is wrong with autism education in the healthcare system. Now, that young lady, as you can well imagine, really struggled in a call centre, because even with headphones on, she could still hear the content of the calls that was going on around her. Noise cancelling headphones made a big difference, but she still found the whole environment really difficult to work in. So she's now out working as ambulance crew and doing amazingly well. But, you know, a reasonable adjustment to her for her mental health needs would be to offer face-to-face sessions, would it not? Obviously, during the COVID-19 pandemic, that would have to be face-to-face sessions, virtually online, a bit like what we're doing today. But phone calls, no, big no, huge. And yet there seems to be a really limited understanding of that out in healthcare. And let's look at one other aspect to this, and that's the impact that it can have on somebody's medical needs. Because the thing with sensory processing is, if you experience sensory processing differently, you are going to experience pain differently. So you may, for example, be supremely sensitive to certain pains that other people would just dismiss. And you might not recognise intense pain that other people would experience until it's too late for you. So you might be the sort of person who gets a paper cut and screams the place down because it really hurts, but can fall over, break their leg, and not know that they've done it. You might experience anxiety as acute stomach pain, which means that you might be in and out of A&E with this crippling pain with no recognition of the fact that actually that's just how your anxiety manifests. Conversely, you might, for example, have appendicitis. Now, I personally know 5 autistic adults who this has happened to. So this is not an isolated thing. I know that's only anecdotal. I don't know if there's any research to back this up, but 5 people who developed appendicitis and didn't realise until their appendices actually ruptured and they ended up in intensive care that they had a problem. Now, for most people, appendicitis presents as sharp stabbing pain, cripples you, has you doubled over. You know, you're going to know you've got it. But for a lot of people who are autistic, whose sensory processing is different, they don't know. They might have a little nagging grumble, but nothing that would impact them to the extent they think they needed to go to hospital. They might then become very seriously ill very, very quickly. So what I would say is, listen to any warning signs. And if you know somebody who perhaps is ordinarily quite sort of healthy in colour, but presents to you one day looking a little bit grey around the gills, but a bit cold and clammy or hot and clammy, yeah, definitely take it very, very seriously, even if they're not complaining of any pain. It's a real thing. But it can have other issues, because there are some autistic people who you literally only have to tap them, and that will feel like a slap, a bruising, a really uncomfortable sensory experience. And I've known, you know, GPs. My own GP at one point slapped my eldest daughter on the back in what was meant to be, you know, just a sort of friendly sort of pat, but yes, it really hurt her. And he didn't understand. He thought she was overreacting and said, "Don't be so ridiculous, I barely touched you," kind of thing. Obviously, it freaked him out because she was reacting so badly. But yeah, the golden rule is don't do it. Just don't do that. Ask before you touch. Warn before you touch. And bear in mind that for them, this touch might be extremely uncomfortable, or they may not be able to sense it at all. So yes, it can have differing impacts. And we know that the pain can be experienced differently. I mean, you know, you've only got to look at women in childbirth to know that apparently there are some women out there who find childbirth an enjoyable experience. Haven't personally met any, but I'm told they exist. And then you've got other women who are going to be asking for every single piece of pain relief right from the first contraction. That doesn't mean that some of us are wimps and some of us are really, you know, well-hard. It just means we experience the pain differently. And I think we have a society that sort of we do kind of, we big up people. Oh, you only had gas now. Whoa, well done. Actually, they're just lucky. They're just lucky they didn't need anything else. So I think we need to move away from that sort of attitude towards pain, that you're somehow superior if you can endure lots of pain. It's not necessarily a good thing. Helpful, but not a good thing. So we need to, particularly in healthcare, look at how we can prioritise sensory sensitivity. Now, you might find it's helpful to complete a sensory checklist to find out what sort of things trigger a reaction with an individual. They may already have done that themselves. They may be able to tell you what sort of things they can't tolerate, but they may not be able to tell you, particularly if at that moment they are overloaded by their sensory experience. Now, I know that there are such things as hospital passports. I don't know from Keely whether she's ever tried producing one of those. They're available from the National Autistic Society, and basically they outline somebody's care needs. But you have to read them. It's always worth asking somebody if they've got one, and it's always worth asking somebody to show it to you, or if they haven't got one, maybe they can write down what they're having an issue with rather than being able to verbalise it. I know an alarming number of autistic people who, once they are in that situation where their sensory overload, their pain overload, everything is too much, they just become completely mute. They're not able to verbalise at all. Studies by the Sensory Processing Disorder Foundation suggest that more than 3/4 of autistic people have significant symptoms of sensory processing disorder. And you can have sensory processing disorder and not be autistic too, by the way. But sensory processing differences are now part of the diagnostic criteria for autism at last. And they're defined in the DSM-5 as hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input, or unusual interests in sensory aspects of the environment, such as apparent indifference to pain or temperature, adverse response to specific sounds or textures, excessive smelling or touching of objects, visual fascination with lights or movement. But that's a such as. And what we don't want is for healthcare professionals to look at those and go, oh, right, or she doesn't like lights, so therefore it's not sensory processing, because it is. That's just one aspect. You might be fascinated or you might be repelled. There are loads of different checklists available. Some are better than others. There are checklists for adults, there are checklists for children. The Department for Education have produced one which is solely used for schools, but actually could be used for people more generally. And there's loads and loads of things out there. But what we need to think about is the individual that you're working with, and it may be that they haven't actually ever realised that what they're experiencing is different from other people. The young lady who works for the ambulance service didn't realise until she was 22 that what she was experiencing was different to everyone else. It should have been fairly obvious, because she'd always, as she was growing up, she had clearly had different hearing processing going on. She went for hearing tests as a small child and passed with flying colours, and yet didn't appear to be able to hear certain people's voices in classrooms, or she could hear but wasn't responding because she basically didn't understand what she was meant to be responding to. When the family went out for meals, they go to places like McDonald's, and you'd have the piped music in the background, and she would always be able to identify the tune and the artist that was playing, even when to everybody else that was quite a muffled sound that they couldn't really hear. So it was assumed that she had good hearing, but nobody actually realised what that meant. And then there was a day when she was sitting with her mother in a pub, in one of those pub restaurant places. Big room, huge, great big room. I think it was a Beefeater or something. And she was sitting, and she watched some people come in, and they went and sat right the other side of the room. And she said to her mother, oh, I work with those people. And her mother said reassuringly, well, don't worry, they're the other side of the room. She said, no, but I can hear everything that they're saying. And her mother's jaw dropped. What? Seriously? Yeah, can't you? And that was when she found out. And that was when her mother found out as well. So yeah, it may be that they don't know. It may be that, unlike Keely, they're unable to be able to explain what it is about A&E that they can't stand. So what you then need to do is to try and consider the options for them. So it's about looking at that environment. Look at the obvious things first of all. Are there likely to be some direct sources of annoyances? We know that fluorescent lights in particular have an underlying subtle level of flicker, which can be intensely disturbing if you've got sensory sensitivity to that. They might not bother you, but they might be hugely problematic for someone else. So, ask them if they would like you to turn the lights off. You might just get a nod. You might not get any response at all, and that's difficult. Can they tolerate other people nearby them? Can they, do they need a bit more personal space? Obviously, again, with the pandemic, keeping this 1 metre distancing has been absolutely fantastic for an awful lot of autistic people. The community have really enjoyed the fact that they're social distancing, and my husband has a T-shirt which says I was social distancing before it was fashionable. Is there a quiet place they can go? Is there a room which is maybe got less people walking backwards and forwards, or it's got a door rather than a curtain? Think about all the things you could do to try and reduce the sensory overload. We all know that A&E is a very noisy place. There's that continual beeping from machines and people running forwards and backwards, and there might be shouting, and that's assuming it's not a Friday night when there might be all sorts of other things going on. Do they need the space that they're in to be just defined? And this is maybe in the waiting room, so that they feel that they're in their own little bubble and they're not being tripped over, trodden on, run past by other people. And can they get out easily if they need to? If they absolutely have to leave, how easy is it going to be for them to leave? Is the exit clear? Can you give them an alternative route out so they don't have to stumble back through the waiting room, for example, at the doctor's surgery? Have a think about those things as well. And most importantly, do they actually want to, or do they have to be there? We do have remote consultation now. Some people are very negative about that, but for a lot of autistic people, having a video consultation might be more effective than going down to the doctors themselves. And if they are going to go down to the doctors and they're going to have an appointment, can we at least try and keep it to the time? Do everything in your power for that appointment to be at such a point in the day that it's not likely to have overrun or been overrun by somebody else's. Because that's important too. It really is crucial. They might find it too distracting to be in a noisy environment to be able to explain and enunciate to the doctor or the medical professional what it is that they need. They might find, if you're doing sort of sessional work with somebody, that if the room is very noisy or the surroundings are quite noisy, that they can't focus on the tasks in hand. Even things like, the chair that they're sitting on might be too hard, might need to be more cushioned. They might need to rock. And, a lot of us will worry if we see somebody rocking because, it looks like a sign of distress, and very often is. But it's also something that can be very comforting. And when you stop to think about it, rocking chairs were invented for a reason. We rock babies because it's soothing. So if that person is rocking, just don't comment. Just let them get on with it, because it's probably helping them to stay focused, to stay in the room, to stay with you. Sometimes they can respond well to having the distraction of favourite music in the background, but sometimes that can have the opposite effect. So again, it's working with the individual. It might mean that, for example, you need to allow earphones when you're with them, because they need that just to keep themselves present, rather than it being the distraction you might automatically think it is. They might rely on their phone to present them with reassuring things. There might be all sorts of other things going on. They might fiddle an awful lot. They might be doing things like wringing their hands. You'll see a lot of the good old knee bouncing, and all of these things that we do associate with anxiety and can very much be anxiety driven, can also, again, because they're self-stimulatory behaviours, they can actually be quite comforting. So if the behaviour is causing them discomfort, then obviously we want to try and find an alternative. But if it's not causing them discomfort, then let them get crack on. That's much better that they do. Some autistic people will also report having symptoms of a condition that's known as synesthesia. That's where your sensory information stimulates more or different senses than it should. So people report hearing colours or seeing sounds or tasting words, feeling sensations on their skin when they smell certain scents. They may also see abstract concepts like time projected in the space around them. There's a speaker, if you get the chance to hear him, called Paul Isaacs, who's an autistic speaker who discusses this phenomenon, and it's something that you can go and look up afterwards. But again, that can complicate everything, your sensory experience. But you also have to consider autism in itself, because there are many other aspects to autism which have an impact on the way that you experience the sensory environment around you. The autistic thinking style can be responsible for creating some really unhelpful rules around previous sensory experiences, as can your emotional experiences. You can develop really rigid thought patterns that prevent you from doing certain things at certain times in certain places. And if you have a negative sensory experience, then you're unlikely to ever enjoy the activity linked to that experience again. And you're likely to try to avoid it at all costs. I mean, Keely's given us the example of the fact that she dreads going to A&E. For my eldest, it used to be hand dryers in public toilets. And I still don't know how much of that was just because they're noisy or because when she was a toddler, they used to trot them into the playgroup loos, which were adult loos, to wash their hands before snack time. And there was a hand dryer on the wall, and they used to queue up to get in, and they'd be queuing underneath the hand dryer, so it would, their heads would set it off. But the upshot for us was that we couldn't go anywhere where there was a public loo with a hand dryer unless we were in there by ourselves and we promised not to turn it on. She has outgrown that now, but she's 29. It took a while. You can probably think of all sorts of examples of sensory experiences you might have had that have put you off doing things for life. Maybe tastes have put you off certain foods. I didn't eat curry for years because school curry was so vile. So I just associated that with any sort of Indian food and didn't touch it. I now love Indian food. Can't understand what I was thinking. My husband absolutely pathologically loathes cats, really hates them. And this dates back to when he was a child and he had an uncovered sandpit in his garden. Probably don't need to go any further with that analogy, do I? There can be all sorts of things. And aversive sensory experiences include things that we expose people to on a daily basis. The school bell, especially in some secondary schools where they use a fire alarm as their bell. So you don't just get a gentle ting, you get something that goes woo, woo, and you can see children bracing themselves for it going off. Why do we do that to people? Most of the things that we could put into place for the benefit of people who are experiencing these negative things would actually probably benefit all of us. So think about that. Think about the sensory environment that you're in at the moment, or that you normally work in, or that you practice your employment in. Think about what you could do to make it a little bit more friendly. But we also need to think about how we communicate. Now, there may be other coexisting issues. Physical pain and discomfort can affect how someone behaves, and it can affect how they're experiencing their sensory environment again. But they won't necessarily be able to tell you, and they won't necessarily even know themselves that this is what's happening and this is why it's happening. And I'm just using eating as an example again because it's a really easy example to use. Gut pain can cause people to overeat for comfort. Constipation can dampen appetite. Heartburn can stop someone wanting to continue to eat. Toothache and mouth ulcers can make someone reluctant to put things in their mouth, and they don't necessarily know why. Some medication can affect appetite, so something that's often prescribed for hyperactive people, Ritalin, or some antidepressants. Antibiotics can cause stomach upsets and affect your ability to process your food and also to want to eat it. And if you suffer with a bloated intestine, that can cause you to feel full even when you're not. But also, if you've got sensory processing differences, sometimes you don't know when you're full or you don't know when you're hungry. So if you don't have a schedule telling you when to eat and when not to eat, you might overeat or undereat because of those reasons too. And eating can also be affected by delays in physical development or low muscle tone. So you could encourage activities that help develop mouth and jaw movement, like using straws, blowing a whistle, blowing bubbles, using a toothbrush. But again, brushing your teeth as a sensory experience, really uncomfortable. Bristles, the taste of the toothpaste. I mean, for years, one of my two didn't brush her teeth properly because she couldn't stand the taste of peppermint. So she just assumed all toothpaste was equally revolting. And she's now got to a point where she's found a brand she can stand. Some people who overeat because they aren't able to know when they're full have a condition known as Prader-Willi syndrome, which is a rare genetic condition, but it can be tested for. But if you do the tests and they haven't got that, then don't dismiss it as greed, because it may indicate really difficult issues with their interoception. A lot of autistic people don't know when they need to use the loo until it's too late. Anecdotally, certainly, I can tell you that there's an awful lot of issues with constipation. There's an awful lot of issues with accidents. A lot of autistic children, when they have to go to school, aren't yet completely out of nappies. We certainly, I don't mind sharing, and I know she won't mind me sharing either. My eldest was still in dry nights up until her early teens, because she couldn't control her bladder at all at night. And we had, all the usual interventions, nothing worked. And then one day my husband went, yeah, well, I was 15 before I was dry at night. And you think, okay, it's genetic then. Anxiety as well will cause us all to feel the need to control things. For some, that can become an eating disorder. There is ongoing research at the moment into whether or not anorexia, for example, might actually be explained by being almost like a female presentation of autism, because there's so many overlaps between how anorexia presents and how autism seems to manifest in females. And it's not that females and males experience autism differently so much that historically we used to think that it was only boys that were autistic. So if girls weren't very, very obviously autistic, they tended to fly under the radar, and a lot of them still do. But the issue with sensory perception, it goes across both genders, and you won't necessarily see much difference. You know, there are boys who have eating disorders too, but it's worth bearing in mind, if you're seeing someone who's got an eating disorder, who's obviously got issues around control and anxiety, it might be worth exploring whether those issues extend further out and they might be autistic. For others, anxiety can lead to what we describe as highly demand avoidant behaviour. And for those individuals, any kind of demand that is perceived by them will, how can I put this politely, will be met with a refusal, basically. It won't be necessarily a flat no. It might be, oh, I've twisted my arm so I can't write today, or I've lost my book so I can't do that piece of reading, or no, I've got a migraine so I can't do X, Y, Z. There's all sorts of excuses that they're going to come out with. And basically, even if they perceive a demand, even if you haven't made a direct demand of them, they, oh, I can't do that, oh no, that won't work. All of that kind of response can often indicate that underneath they're really, really struggling with their anxiety. So it's vital that you communicate with your patients, your clients, whoever it is that you're working with, in a really clear and consistent and calm way. And bear in mind that if their anxiety is through the roof, you doing a lot of talking is going to add to that overload. So it's keeping your instructions and your information giving as short and as simple and as concrete and unambiguous as you possibly can. If you can present information to them visually, that's immensely helpful. And I know people, probably laugh, and you might laugh at me for telling you this, but when I was recently, my eldest had to have some fairly life-changing surgery, and I found myself in this hospital in the middle of nowhere. I'd never been, and I obviously paced up and down for quite a while. And during the course of my exploration of all the corridors, I needed to go to the loo, so I went into the loo, and after I'd finished, I washed my hands. Now, I don't mind sharing with you that I'm 60 years old and I know how to wash my hands, but having the instructions on the wall showing me exactly how to wash my hands in that moment was immensely comforting, and I followed every single bit of the instructions, literally cartoon by cartoon. I got the soap. I did the fingers, did the backs of my hand. Just followed it. And afterwards, I thought, well, that's really weird, but it's comforting. Having visual information there is really reassuring. Having a sign up that reinforces that you're in the right place is really, really, really reassuring. Having too much information can be problematic, but sometimes having stuff up, even when you think it shouldn't be necessary, can be the difference between someone being able to cope and not being able to cope. You may find that the autistic people you meet have already got some visual cards on them, communication cards on them, and if they have, brilliant, because you can help them to communicate using those. But they may not, and they may not even know they're autistic. So just bear in mind that too much information, the use of sarcasm or any kind of teasing might be more than they can cope with. So adjust your communication style accordingly. Some of you would have heard the term sensory diet mentioned in relation to autism and sensory processing, or just in relation to sensory processing. And it's got nothing to do with food, unlike some of the other examples I've given you. Sensory differences are never going to magically vanish, but it's really important to help the person to understand and regulate their sensory input. And you can give them lots of support in doing this. And ideally, someone will have a sensory assessment by a sensory trained occupational therapist, but I know that they're as rare as hen's teeth. You may be able to access some of that support via mental health services, but it's sporadic at best. But if you can, and you get a report from that, that will identify the person's sensory profile, and hopefully give then a list of suggestions and recommendations, and those are the sensory diet that the person needs. And so it's based on the sensory profile of the individual. It may be that somebody can do enough reading, do enough research around the topic to be able to work out what their sensory needs are. But the main meal of a sensory diet is something that they need scheduled regularly, that they can actually anticipate and look forward to, that's going to make them feel better. It might be something as simple as a walk. It might be something as simple as just a quiet break from everybody else. It might be that they need some kind of oral motor activity if they've got issues around that. It might be a physical activity such as a sensory circuit. So, whether you're climbing, whether you're running, whether you're rolling on a gym ball or having a gym ball rolled over the top of you, which is equally, in terms of seeking deep pressure, a really positive thing to do. It might be time wearing a weighted blanket or a jacket. And it could be anything from 5 minutes to half an hour or so while that activity takes place. And the idea is that it gives them energy and calm and focus for the rest of the day. So ideally, they'd be doing it first thing. But obviously, if they're in a hospital, when are they going to have the opportunity to do this? And if they're used to doing something fairly regularly, that can, again, add to their level of debilitation while they're with you. So try to find out if there's anything that they need. Having sensory snacks, the things that are available whenever they need them, never ever rationed, can include things to fiddle with. Now, hopefully you as healthcare professionals aren't going to have a problem with that. I do a lot of training in schools, and there can be a bit of resistance to giving class members things to fiddle with because it's seen as a distraction, but it's not. It actually helps concentration and helps focus, and giving somebody something to manipulate if they are sensory seekers can be the difference between them being able to concentrate and hear you and them not being able to because they're too distracted by needing to fiddle with something and not being able to fiddle with what they need to. It may be that you have headphones, noise cancelling headphones available to them so they can sit and focus on what it is they need to focus on rather than being distracted by all the external sensory input. It might be that you provide knobbly sort of sensory cushions or slanted cushions so that they've got options when it comes to where they sit and how they sit. It might be that they've got their own things. One of the things I've seen increasingly people using is this stuff called jewellery. So you have jewellery which you can chew. That will work for people who've got oral motor sensory seeking needs sometimes, but not if they're particularly driven to chew, say, wood. In that case, chewing a bit of rubber isn't going to do it. Or if they're the sorts of people that chew their clothes and you've got, frayed sweatshirt sleeves and collars, then they need something like that to chew. It's got to meet the actual sensory need. It can't just be a generic fiddle item. So you can't cheerfully go off to Amazon and order a box of tangles, for example, these little plastic things that you can fiddle with, and think, oh, I've provided something for everybody, because you won't be for everybody. But you can offer a selection of calming things that may or may not work. It might be that they just need to stroke a piece of fabric, or they need to squeeze a squeezy ball. And those things are usually offered to some extent at conferences and things like that, free of charge. Obviously, we've missed out on all of that for the last couple of years thanks to COVID, but I'm pretty sure there will be people sending samples into your places at work occasionally. And I mean, I've got somewhere a squeezy brain that was provided by one of the health trusts that were exhibiting at an autism conference I went to. So all of those things, collect them because they might be really useful to the people that you're working with. But it's about supporting them to regulate themselves. It's about them beginning to understand what works for them, what makes them feel better. It might be that they just need to doodle. It might be that they need to sit and rock. It might be that they need to get up and pace around the room. And if you're not used to that, it can be quite sort of threatening when somebody, maybe an adult male of sort of fairly big build gets up and starts pacing around the room. You might misinterpret that for aggression. And it's not. They just need to walk off whatever it is they're experiencing. I've allowed an hour for this, and I've actually talked so quickly, and I'm really sorry that we've more or less got to the end of it. But I know that Bex is quite keen that we have some time to answer your questions. So I'm going to finish off with some recommended resources, some books that you might find useful. A really basic and a really, really good book is Can I Tell You About Sensory Processing Difficulties? It's by a lady called Sue Allen, and it just talks about all of the sensory processing stuff from the point of view of the person who's having the issues. There's a really good textbook by Olga Bogdashner, who's worked in this field for a very, very long time. The second edition was out at the point at which I put this list together. There may be a third edition coming out, I don't know. But the reason I think there might be is because Asperger's syndrome as a diagnosis has disappeared pretty much from the medical profession. They now talk about autistic spectrum disorder or autism, and Asperger's doesn't tend to come out of the woodwork quite so much, so a lot of people are changing their book titles to reflect that. There's also the Practical Sensory Programs for Students with ASD, which is by Sue Larkey, and really good just for the fact that it's got some good checklists in it and some fantastic activities. And then finally, there was a book released by the National Autistic Society some years ago called Sensory Strategies, which you might still be able to get copies of. It is a huge area of need, and it's only relatively recently that we've come to understand just how much of an impact it can have. There is also, and some of you might be aware of this already, but just in case you're not, on the local NHS occupational therapy website, there is a free training video. The link is there, and that link will be coming out in your handouts. And finally, if you've got any questions beyond today about autism and sensory processing, you can always ring our helpline. So I hope that's been helpful. I'll just unshare this if I can work out how to do that. I have absolutely no idea how to do that. Although I think it's gone.
Yes,
Has it gone?
you've
Yes.
done it.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mandy. And I know I've seen comments already in the chat of people saying how useful they found it and how informative. So thank you so much. And just a quick shout out and thank you for all of the things that you've been posting in the chat. There's been some kind of engaging discussions going on, and I know lots of resources. And don't worry, we'll send you out an email. It should be with you by the end of today with the slides from this and some of the resources that we've been mentioning throughout. So you should have access to those pretty soon. There are a couple of people with their hands up. If you could share, if it's about a question, and you could share it in the chat or send an email to me separately, rebecca.ellis at autismbeds.org. It will come up at the end on a screen, so you'll be able to see. That would be super helpful, just because there are so many of you. We might very well be able to kind of answer some separate questions with some time at the end. But yeah, just reach out and we'll answer them. So I'd like to hand back over to Keely, and a slightly different stance this time, looking at some really positive things that have happened to make her feel more supported in a healthcare environment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, all good, Keely.
Perfect. Ironically, I have. I'm just going to give you a GP experience that I should have done earlier, but because of all the beeping, I couldn't function. Sensory wise, I was like, I can't add that on top. So I'm really sorry that I've put it slightly out of order, but it's a little one and it will give GPs and doctors and others in that kind of situation. If it's okay, I'll just quickly run it through now. For me, I struggle with you'll get a call back from the doctor at some point today. It's unpredictable and I'm not prepared. I'll have prepared notes for the appointment to help me aid in communication, like I have now. And funnily enough, whilst in a lower school playground picking up my son at 3:30, they're not to hand, nor whilst in a queue at Tesco getting milk. I may be very ill, but a mum can't stop, so the world keeps going, and it's this unpredictability. These appointment leeways might work for the doctors, but I'm left spiraling. I'm not in a structured place with a pad and a pen and my prompts in front of me. So it becomes a mess. And I confess to having rather a large meltdown on one doctor one day who rang because I just couldn't function in the situation I was in, nor converse over the phone with him at the same time. Oh, the poor chap. He just rapidly agreed to a face-to-face appointment with him in 2 days. I thought he was brave to book me in with him after dealing with me as a mess on the phone, as I made little sense, and I'm well aware and wouldn't have blamed him if he'd palmed me off to somebody else. I I find it really difficult. The differences are immense for me between having it structured and not having it structured. I can talk to you now because I've had 4 weeks to plan how to say it and what to say. But if I didn't have that control and you were talking back to me, it's not as easy for me to communicate. I don't find it so smooth as much as I need it to. But I go through the stress of the GP every time. I screw up with it. I feel like I'm wasting their time and mine because I can't think. I can't get what I need to say together. And it just feels too sudden and unplanned. And I look quite funny, I think, if I've got a booked appointment. I'm very aware, if it's a video appointment even, that I will actually sit at my laptop 10 minutes before as if I'm really in a waiting room. And I'll have my notes laid out and my dogs will be put away and my children banished and the coffee will be in hand in case I go dry on my throat and my questions are ready and I can roughly predict what he's going to ask me. I've got the room silent. And so I'm able to focus on what they're going to say to me and or who's going to answer or what their accent's going to be like or are they going to speak fast or slow. And so I prep my own area as much as I can before I even do this. If I'm going to a planned appointment, I have a prompt list in case I go mute. It's something the GP and I can start from. Even if I can't speak, I can give him the list and then he's looked down it and gone, okay, number one, you've put this, and then that kind of helps trigger me to be able to communicate. Otherwise, I can just stare with big eyes, just not knowing what to say. And then he'll write down what the plan is. So when I walk out and all the sensory overload is finished, I can look back and see what we actually discussed and what I'm responsible for just as much. But if it's the first time I've met the doctor or it's a different room, I personally have a doctor's surgery with many different doctors. It's incredibly unpredictable who you're going to see. So if it's a new doctor or it's a different room, first I process as I walk in the room, it's the smell of the room, the light, the sound, the textures, the way the voice sounds in the room, the acoustics, even the stability of the floor, where some of them are quite old buildings. So I'm very conscious of how I'm walking because I can have my balance impacted. I'm looking at the ceiling height and bearing in mind my height and impacts. Then I'm on to locating where the chair is and how I'm going to get there. And once I've done all of this, if it's a predictable, the transition can be smooth and I can then focus on the human that's in the room. But if something catches my attention that seems odd or out of place, then I can't help but need to address that. So it can be something that I can't think past. Why is that area of the carpet shiny? Oh, yep, it's the light through the window and it's hitting that mirror and that's reflecting on. Okay, that's normal. And then I'll try and focus back again. It could be those walls are way too white and bright, and wow, I'm so overtaken with the light, and I need to adjust to the visual first. And I'll try and move my eyes away to somewhere else that isn't so bright and all-consuming. Like, I don't know, usually a bookcase is quite a bit calmer because it's usually a darker colour. But then I might spot an old book and wonder where that's come from, or the windows and how big they are, and when was this building built? And all these different things are going off at once because they're all, in my head, they're all linked, they're all important to where I am in the room and the existence. And this is kind of before I've even sat down and acknowledged what this human looks like, that I'm supposed to have conversed with 5 seconds into walking into the room. So this is all going on really, really, really quickly. Then, okay, I'll settle down and, oh, there's the human. All right, what are they asking? Oops, sorry. Right, okay, look at them. Gosh, they seem cross. How do you talk to a cross person? Especially when they're busy. Quickly, factually. Okay, go. And then I'll go into what it is. And it may sound unemotional. I might be telling you that I am absolutely distraught, but have a straight face completely. Because I've practiced what I'm going to say so many times so that I don't go mute, I don't trip up, I don't fall over, I get out what I need to say that I know I need to say. So it can come across really unemotional because I need to get it out. And it's so important because in a few minutes, if I don't get it out and I don't get it right now, the door's going to shut and it's all going to be over. And I'm going to be at square one, not remembering what they said, what we agreed, what we were going to do, or I forgot to tell them about this that's having an impact on the meds. Or whatever it is, it's all so big. And for a doctor, I think it's just a 5-minute meet someone and walk away, and it's so different for us. I've got a very sensitive gag reflex. I can't. The dentist is interesting, but even swallowing tablets is nearly impossible. The taste is highly sensitive too. So is my sense of smell. Opening medicine pill pots. And then having just the smell of the pills can make me gag. I've been known to avoid medication because of the distress it triggers taking it. I don't get messages, funnily enough, like you mentioned earlier, that I'm hungry. So if I'm particularly stressed or focused, it can be days before I realise I haven't actually eaten anything. I don't get messages that I need to go to the loo until the very last seconds. So I can totally neglect my own needs purely because I'm just trying to exist. So I can forget a lot with all those different messages going on and all those distractions going on. Obviously, your auditory intake of what people are telling you isn't flowing as well either. So you don't remember everything that was discussed. So trying to put it together later is extremely difficult. When I come out, I don't remember what I was told, but there is one thing that you might be able to put in the chat, which I've asked so many people and no one can answer this question for me, is I get medication that says things like drink with a full glass of water. That is so ambiguous to me. I see a shot glass, I see a fruit juice glass, I see a half pint, I see a pint, and I have no idea what a full glass is. And so I literally will change my glass size on different days because I don't know what it means. And not many people seem to. And it's something that actually I worry about because I don't know why there needs to be a full drink. So if anyone can clarify what the amount is, that'd be cracking. Or is it just not that important? But those are the kind of things that go through our brain all the time. If I have more warning that the meltdown that I had in the GPs when he rang me, I just was sobbing. And I was like, I'm at my son's school and I can't talk to you now. And this is confidential and I'm in a school and I can't do this. And why would you call me now? And oh, the poor man. I don't know how he agreed to see me later. But the difference between a structured appointment is like, I can do this and be totally conversive, or it can be erratic and I am just totally overloaded and it ends up almost being a waste of time for all involved. But what I can say is I have met some awesome people across the health sector who have been very interested and wanted to understand autism better. Great Ormond Street Hospital, GOSH is what I call it for short, but my son's a regular visitor of both the day and the stay visits there. They're aware of my autism and they always try to put us in exactly the same bay or exactly the same room every time we go for the operations, because then I know the layout, I know the lights, I know the setup, I can control the light setup if I'm overstimulated. I know where the basics are so that if I need something and I can't communicate, I could just get the towel for my son or whatever the basic need was, so that I could have a routine of security. And they were so fabulous at just always keeping it in the same bay wherever possible. And the reduction in my sensory stress, having it away from the main desk and away from the main passageway, has a huge impact. They don't try to open up the area or come in without a warning. They don't turn lights on without letting me know that they're about to turn them on. They have a really good app that lists all my son's needs and his allergies. And straight after an appointment, there will be post notes at the appointment, will be able to be accessed so I can look back over what we discussed. It will have a section where I can ask any questions afterwards. And although the clause does say you could, if it, it's for non-emergency only and it can take up to 3 days to respond, it's direct and it's a simple box. I can ask my question and then I can wait. And usually, I think it's just them. I don't think it's anything to do with my autism. Usually I hear it from them within a day, responding to whatever the question was. So that can help control my anxiety and I'm not taking up more time. I don't need to make more appointments because it's only one small question that they can solve really quickly or direct me. So I find that when I go talk to his school and I go blank with what is wrong with him because they're long words, I can pull up the GOSH app. I can show them it when he's got all these different allergies that he's flagged up. I've got copies that I can print and I can send to the schools, so the schools are aware in case something goes downhill while he's in school's care. It gives so much more freedom. There's that side. It gives me time to process for myself in my time and space what was discussed and what happened, and that's huge. I've had, when I go, we have, I don't think it's been mentioned, but we have a green lanyard with sunflower logo on. And I know it's been used quite a lot to do with masks and anxiety more recently. But prior to COVID, it was more recognised to do with autism. And the GOSH team, if any reception I've gone up to and they clock it, and they'll immediately, they don't make a big thing, they'll just immediately say, do you want to sit somewhere quiet? And then I am, funnily enough, always say yes, please, very desperately. And they send me just down an empty corridor. It might have lots of other equipment, but it's just me and my son. And then I can go, okay, I've got here. We've done that. We've done the train journey. And I have to process all of that sitting there. And then I can start preparing and getting my notes out for the conversation that's going to happen in the consultation. And just having that quiet zone where nobody is running past me or talking and all different noises and volumes, and makes such a difference that I can go in and perform better for my son, which is my priority. These simple extra measures that they do, they are small, but they're so big that it enables me that when I go to GOSH, I know it's going to be a long day. I know it's going to be a sensory overload, and I know I'm going to be wiped out for a day or two from the fatigue of the impact. But I actually go quite happily because I know that they'll respect me. And it doesn't mean stupid demands. It just means their walls are a little bit calmer coloured. Their speech is a little slower. Their speed is a lot slower because they're dealing with children. So they automatically calm everything down. It's simple things like that that have had a huge positive impact, that have enabled me to be the best mum I can be for my son in those dangerous times when he needs me performing at my best. I need to be at my best, and I can bring provisions. I can bring ear defenders. I can bring sunglasses. I will wear baseball caps to block out lights that I can't control. I will take some empowerment of and control over it. But some of the other ones that are so simple, I could save you a fortune on electric if you cut down your lights. That'd be a good one. Um, but at my local hospital, I find respiratory nurses are really good, I think, because they're used to dealing with people that are low on oxygen and processing that bit slower because the oxygen's not going to the brain. They tend to sit next to you rather than interrogation style in front of you. They talk slower, they wait longer without getting frustrated for an answer. And they're just little things that make a huge difference. I took a lung capacity test only a few weeks ago, and the guy there asked me about the lanyard, and I explained about having autism. And I will wear my mask. If I'm in a good place and I can do it, I'll wear my mask. I do my best when I can. But if my asthma and that's up, I haven't got much hope. But yeah, he was saying to me, wow, what can I do in this room that would make such a difference to you? And I said, well, things you could change this split second is the lights. And I looked up and it was quite a big room, and there were 9 big square lights going all the way along. And he said, oh, I could cut a strip off if you like. And I thought, oh, yes, please. And he turned it off, and it just, I noticed whether he liked it or not, but my mouth engaged a lot more. I could chat a lot more. He might not want to hear it all, but I could chat a lot more. Just by the lights being dropped down a little bit. So I was so grateful, because you wouldn't have known that I was struggling, because I will carry on talking and masking the way and when I talk about masking, or anyone talks about masking, I think what we're doing, I know for me, it's in life, we've watched our elders go out and do do their thing, and So we try to copy, and that's what we do. You know, all children copy. So you'd copy what others were doing, but it wouldn't go right for you. You couldn't manage it, or you couldn't take that noise. And there's a sense of failing there, because you're thinking, why does the rest of the world do this? Well, how can they do this? And I can't stand in this room and do that. What is wrong with me? Um, and so we spend a lot of time masking so that we don't let people know how bad it's impacting us, because it can feel weak because it's so misunderstood. That shoots me in the foot because I then get, but look, you can converse, you can talk, you can do this, you know. And I just, it, it's neurological autism. It's not a choice, it's a neurological thing. It doesn't matter what a person looks like, there's still the neurology issues in there. So I can talk, I can converse with you now, but there are many lists of meltdowns I can tell you about, of not getting things right, of embarrassing myself because I couldn't cope, feelings of failure to the extreme where I ended up in hospital so many times with chronic brittle asthma and exhaustion. And it took so long before I was diagnosed and they found out why, and that it was down to the fact that I was autistic and I just kept pushing too much. People, the society around, the expectations I put on myself and others were all so big that I couldn't do what others did. I couldn't. And it was about having to learn to change the way I was. And I still don't always know. I didn't know why I dropped Becca in it earlier when I cut halfway through what should have been talking about two situations. I didn't know at the time. All I knew is I needed to stop. But it was that time during the slideshow that I could take time and think, it's that beeping. I couldn't cope with that beeping. Because now I hope you can hear a difference in my voice and the way I'm talking and conversing, because I've got incense burning right now, a nice lavender. It's nice and calm. I'm in my zone at home, and I haven't got the beeping. So I'm a lot more calm and functioning. Um, I'm just trying to think about that's what I was saying, that there are many different positive experiences, but I just, yeah, the more it gets out, the more people need to understand. I have a daughter who is autistic, who is very different to me. Her fears and anxieties got so high that she began to hallucinate with anxiety. And that was a whole learning curve for me to understand that anxiety can be so high, you can actually hallucinate with fear. And that my daughter's autism had her so highly anxious that it triggered hallucinations. That's been a phenomenal learning journey. Very humbling. And it's, to this day, she still struggles to access the world, even though she's very high functioning and could talk and quite happily shove me to the side right now and take over this if the setting was right. But then other points, you know, she struggles very, very much. So that if I could give you and leave you with one more thing, and it's very small, but it's hopefully, we were trying to discuss, we had a group of us and we were talking about how could I explain sensory and give you an actual impact idea. And the best one we could come up with was, if you could imagine that you were walking down the street in a place unknown. For me, I kind of visualize my own New York because I haven't been there, but it seems very mayhem. But if you're walking down that street on your own and all of a sudden all the lights went out and you're in the complete darkness. And when you do that, I'm sure you're aware, your ears prick up, your eyes get wider, your body gets tense, you're very aware of where your feet are going, what you're touching on the air and around you, and it is incredibly scary being on high alert. And that is how I think we live on a daily basis. Before we leave our homes. So yeah, that's I hope you've enjoyed hearing it and it hasn't been too waffly, but
It's been fab. It has been
I'll hand
so
you back.
Thank you so much. And I'm secretly kind of happy that the beeps happened, because I think, if anything, that gave people an insight into a tiny bit of what it feels like, right? Imagine that magnified and kind of that impacting everything that you're doing. And actually, as much as I am so sorry, Keely, to you for the beeps and everyone else as well, because they were very, very annoying. Actually, it gave us that tiny, tiny, tiny insight into, imagine if that's what's happening to you the whole time. There's been some lovely.
I thought it was quite. I did kind of think it was quite ironic afterwards when I sat down. I was like, oh no, out of all the places, I have to have a moment now.
It was. It's so ironic, and and like, this sums it up, right? Good old technology again, preparing for a world of neurotypical people, right? It's like it's our technology, the tools that we use around us are still not supporting that really high percentage of our population. There's so many lovely comments again, Keely, so feel free to go and have a look through, but a massive thank you as well from everyone here. It made me feel very emotional, especially reading people's comments at the same time, because I think you gave such a good insight into what it's like, and I think that really resonated with people, so thank you so much.
Thanks. I hope it helps. I need everyone to understand that I wouldn't be able to tell you it at the time. I haven't got a clue at the time. I'm just too overloaded for the understanding. It takes sometimes weeks or months to process why I get to where I got. But thank you, everyone, and thanks for joining. I hope you enjoy the training and continue to keep accessing it.
Thanks so much, Keely. Thank you. Oh, got to finish off now, but I must say, and it sounds like lots of other people are feeling similar to me. Yeah, it's emotional. I am going to share my slides, and we've just got a little bit more to finish off. So 1 second as I just share and make sure that we've got sound included. Here we go. And so, yeah, how to follow that. I hope that's resonated with lots of you. I know it has, from seeing what you said in the chat. And I guess we just wanted to end with any level of support that we can also provide. We know that you are all so busy and doing so many things, and there are so many priorities, and autism is one of those things. And so just wanted to kind of offer any opportunity or any tools that we can to help. So a couple of useful resources, and some of these we've already talked through. Mandy, Keely have mentioned in different kind of points. The first two are ideas to be able to support people when they're coming in to a venue, to a location, and don't really know what to expect. And that can be so scary, especially if there's lots of sensory sensitivities and not knowing exactly what you're walking into. And I'm going to show you an example of a video that we've created that's a walkthrough of where an appointment is held, and something that maybe, if you don't have already, could use to help support people. And equally, this could be a visual story, so not in a video format too. And kind of the best thing would be to have both of these to allow people whatever is useful for them and whatever is their style of kind of taking information in, to have that ready. And I'll show you an example of that after this too. We've talked about hospital passports, autism passports. So there's a kind of more general learning disability hospital passport. You'll get these slides afterwards. There's links through to all of these. There's a more specific autism passport, and that's the one that Mandy was referring to, that the National Autistic Society have got, which talks a little bit about special interests and sensory sensitivities and things like that. And then there's a kind of grab and go, grab and go kind of quicker passport for those who were having problems breathing during the COVID, while we're still here, just kind of quicker information that could be filled out quicker to get them into hospital. So just in case you don't know where these are, these will be provided in the slides, and you'll be able to get links for these. And then easy read versions of documentation. From kind of talking to people as we're working through this campaign, and we've been talking to different people over nearly a year now, I guess just a bit less, talking about easy read versions of documentation. It quite often becomes a different department's priority, right, to create easy read versions. And I think quite a lot of you have easy read versions for very specific things, but it's really kind of everything that gets sent out, emails and kind of messages, appointment reminders. Kind of having those easy read versions of documentation can make such a difference to people. So maybe investigating if there's any support anywhere. So I wanted to take you through a video walkthrough and an example of what this could be. And I guess that we're inviting you if you would so like, and it would of course come at a cost, but we could help create these for you. So let me just take you through. Hopefully you can hear the sound. Welcome to the Adult Autism Service at the Twinwoods Clinical Resource Centre. When you enter the building, you will check in at the reception window. We will check your temperature with our contactless thermometer, and you can sanitize your hands. Toilet facilities can be found here, and the disabled facilities are just over here. You will be asked to wait in this area, and then a member of our team will come and collect you. Then you will be taken to a room nearby where you will talk to a member of our team. Once you've finished your appointment, it's a short walk back to reception to leave. So something like this can have a huge impact, just that walkthrough. And I mentioned also these visual stories as well, so not a video but in text format, and this could come in a kind of brochure type format. This is something that we've prepared for a centre nearby us where we hold events and workshops and things like that. But you can just see information to really go into everything, talking about parking, where do you go in, where's the entrance to the building, because so much anxiety can already be there before they've even come into the environment. And when that's then a stressful environment to come into, there's just so much going on. So anything that you can help to reduce that anxiety and that can help to support before someone comes into your facility or into your building can be really, really helpful. So like this one just takes them through a map. Here is where it is, here is where you park, this is what the main entrance looks like, this is what the building looks like, the different rooms that you might go into, and these are some staff that you might see here. And obviously this can be sometimes challenging when we have changing staff, but actually here are people that you might recognise. Here are people who you might not be shocked to see. We've got places where you can go for more information. So if anyone is interested in things like this and it would be useful, then please reach out to me and we can help support you. I guess we're just so aware that even though these things might not be really challenging to create, that time is really scarce for a lot of you, and if we can help out with anything, we would love to. And then I just wanted to do a little shout out to what's next. We have another workshop coming up, similar to this one, but with a
Sorry, Bex, can you just reshare the main screen?
Reshare the main screen.
Yeah, the presentation's in a really small box in the top corner.
Oh no, is it because I'm not spotlighted? It might help if you spotlight me.
It's fine for me. Just saying.
Oh, okay.
Good. You will get a copy of these slides, so if it is super small, and there's not a huge amount on here. The kind of key things is that we've got an advocacy and communication workshop coming up. So similar style to this, similar open event, but concentrating a little more on advocacy and communication. I would love for you to fill in the survey, please, because we want to know that the stuff that we're doing here is helpful, and we want to know how much you've learned and where to go next. The link is going to be on the slide deck, but I'm also sending you over an email later today that will have access to that link there as well. And any questions, please do reach out to me. So that's if you're interested at all in any further resources that I haven't already shared. If you've got any questions for any of the speakers that we had today, anything, please send it through my way. The last thing that I just wanted to mention, and it's not up on here, but I might send some information through in that email, is we are also doing some work on workforce. And I think Shana's already been talking about it or mentioning it in the chat. And we're really interested in particularly hearing from autistic adults who are working in healthcare. And we've got a couple of focus groups, a couple of listening groups where we want to hear about their experience and what it's like and if reasonable adjustments are being made and supporting. But we also have a survey as well if people prefer to write rather than come in. So I might share some details of that. It would be really useful if you could share with your teams. That one is focusing specifically on BLMK, so relevant for those of you in Bedfordshire, Milton Keynes. And that's all really. A huge thank you, not only to you guys, but thanks so much to our speakers, Mandy, who is so knowledgeable, and Keely just providing this incredible insight, and a huge thank you. I think we've managed to finish sparing you a bit of time, so we might just have a little flip through the chat and see if there is anything you want to answer live here, but please do reach out. Oh, good. I'm glad you're all enjoying it. Yes. And you will get the copy of the recording, all of you. So everyone who's attended this workshop and those who were signed up and could not attend, I'll send you out a link. That will take a little bit longer because I'm just going to need to upload it somewhere. But the resources that you will get will be later today. You'll get them pretty promptly. Thank you so much. Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear it. Any feedback as well? We know it's a huge, big event and it's a bit of a weirder format, right? Because you're all having to be muted and no camera just because of the amount of people that wanted to attend. So really interested to hear any feedback that you have in that survey or just sending an email. Do any of our speakers want to say any last words, or are we good? Thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much.